to this week's guest in a minute. But first, join our community by hitting the subscribe button and the bell so as soon as we post a new guest, you get it right away. And don't forget to hit the like and share buttons because that helps us grow the show. So welcome. Hit the subscribe button and let's get to this week's guest. Hey, hockey fans, welcome to the 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Gino Retta. You know, I've spent over 4 decades working the game, fortunate enough to meet some of the greats of the game, saw them come into the league, watched them shine the game, and now they've moved on to life after hockey. The 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast gives us a chance to catch up, tell some great stories, relive some great memories, and hear what they're up to today. On this week's show, a 3-time Stanley Cup champion who played his entire 20-year NHL career with the New Jersey Devils, Mr. Devil. Franchise record for games played as a Devil and penalty minutes since his retirement with the Devs in 2003. He's now an analyst and color commentator. He's in the business. Here he is, Ken Daneyko. Kenny, great to see you, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Gino. And yes, when you mentioned, and thank you for the nice, kind words, when you mentioned the most games played, I still shake in Devils history. I still shake my head at that with all our Hall of Fame guys that we had over the years, but certainly proud of it and proud to be part of some really good teams and winning. And that's what it was all about for me.
From some humble beginnings, I need to provide the backdrop because you were pretty much almost a day oneer with the New Jersey Devils organization. You were drafted 18th overall by the Devils in 1982. And the reason that's important is because it was about a month after the then Colorado Rockies were sold to shipping tycoon John McMullen, and then the organization headed to New Jersey. All this happened while you were playing in the dub with the Seattle Breakers. What was that like as your whole future is being decided? You're being drafted in the NHL, excitement, but you're not sure what the heck is going on with your organization.
Well, you're going to need a minute for this one, if you don't mind, G.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, there was, and I've said it many times before, but there was a lot of excitement, obviously, to fulfill a dream and get drafted. And I didn't really know where I was going to go. Obviously, we didn't have the internet, and where now they know when a player eats, sleeps, drinks, every move he makes. You had to rely on
not just they know, Kenny. You're in the media side too, so it's all of us.
So when I was being drafted in New Jersey, number one, they didn't have a team name yet. There was no Devils yet. They were voting on it in a local paper here, the Star Ledger. But look, I would have ran the 2,000 miles or whatever it was from Seattle to New Jersey or Edmonton, where I grew up, just to get that opportunity. And funny thing is, Gino, the Devils hierarchy at the time, as they moved from Colorado, didn't really want to take me, and that's a true story. And Bert Marshall, a scout that I just am indebted to, a guy that followed me around in a beat-up Winnebago for the last 2 weeks of the season in the playoffs. And this is true because they relied so heavily on the scouts. Not that they don't today, they do. But again, what I'm talking about, you see every play, every move, everything they do off the ice as well. Nowadays, where those guys had to come back to the organization, he was a Western League scout, and Bert Marshall stuck his neck out for me and said, if Daneyko's there at 18, I want you to take him. I was not ranked to go in the first round. The Devils management told Bert, he's not ranked there. We don't know enough about him. We're not going to take him. Bert said, I just watched him for 3 weeks. Trust me, this guy's going to play double-digit years for you. I know his heart and his character. If there's some flaws from a talent's perspective, even though we all were offensive in junior, including me, believe it or not, when I obviously found my role as a physical stay-at-home defenseman eventually, because we all have to find our niche for playing and having some sustainability in the National Hockey. But he kept saying to them, I'm just trust me, take them. They go, no. I was ranked to go late second, maybe the third round. At the time, I didn't care where I went as far as round or team at the time. I just wanted my opportunity. And Bert, they looked Bert in the eye. And Bert and I have talked about this. I saw him a few years ago. He's retired. And I just thanked him because I just said, Bert, I don't know if I gave him a hug. I said, I don't know if I thanked you, but I heard a story about you really going to bat for me. And he goes, "Oh, sit down, Kenny. I have to tell you exactly what happened." They looked him in the eye and said, "Bert, are you willing to put your job on the line for this pick?"
Wow.
Yeah. And Bert says, "I'll put my job on the line." And true story. And it's amazing to me that somebody believed in me, because you never know
Yeah.
where it goes. And it turned out obviously better than I ever could have expected, or anybody to play as long as I did with the Devils and the team that was getting me my opportunity. And we were bad. We know that at the start. I wanted to be part of the solution. I loved that I was going there. I wanted to be a guy that built something and be part of from the ground up. But I just, again, love Bert Marshall, because you need somebody to believe in you. And he believed in me wholeheartedly and put his job on the line for me.
You end up landing in the lap of Lou Lamoriello. And I've met him many, many times. The guy's had tremendous success, Hall of Fame in the builders category, winner, 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 over and over and over again. You had an interesting conversation where he kind of sat down and talked to you about your particular role. Tell us about that.
Oh gosh, you know what? I can never tell this enough, and because it means the world to me now. And anybody that knows me, I was intense. I was emotional. Lou was intimidating. Not many guys stood up to him. I happened to do that every once in a while, and and that's what he loved about me. I mean, I think he was sitting in the background as a young kid that was watching me, as a young kid that was just so intense and wore his emotions on his sleeve, and probably chuckle, because we think we know it all as a kid. But anyway, yeah. So I'd already played 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it may be, before Lou Lamoriello came in the summer of '87 to start the 87-88 season. And I still had a little offense. I was getting a little opportunity once in a blue moon on the second power play unit. When Lou came, he was, molding his team and seeing what he had, obviously. And Bruce Driver, who was the second power play unit guy at the time, was injured for 4 games. So Lou didn't know me very well. I'm getting out there, and obviously that's coach's decision. I'm getting out there for the second power play unit. Happened to have 4 points in 4 games on the second power play unit. So, as young kids, you want to do everything. You want to be a scorer. You want to contribute offensively. I knew my role. I knew I was, tough and physical, penalty killer, but I got that chance. So I was so excited, had some success. All of a sudden, Bruce comes back. I'm off the power play. And I'm just moping around. I'm at practice a few days in a row, and I'm, again, wearing my emotion on my sleeve, a little angry. Lou takes me after practice. Kenny, come up to my office. Something's bothering you. He knew exactly what was bothering me, but I'm not thinking that at the time. So I said, all right. I go up to Lou's office, and he goes, listen to me. He says, what's on your mind? I said, well, Lou, I had success in the power play, four games there, had 4 points. And he goes, sit down. He says, I want to explain to you, I liken my team to an orchestra. This is a true story. Hilarious. And what foresight for Lou to say this to a young player and understand his team. And he goes, there's pianists, there's violinists, and there's drummers. What category do you think you fall in there? Well, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I knew where he was headed. I'm a drummer. And he said, in order to make beautiful music, everybody has to play that instrument to a T to have success as a team. And I'm butting them, as all young kids do. But I had success. But. He goes, I don't care if you ever get a point. He says, that's a bonus. He says, you're a penalty killer. You're tough. You protect teammates. That's what you bring to this team. That's your role. And if you don't like it, he says, I'll call 15 other teams, see if they need a violinist.
Wow.
That's what he said to me. And I'm just frothing. You can see I'm red, steam coming out of my head, but I'm hearing him. I'm listening to him. And he goes, I get up. Meeting was kind of over because he had said his piece and explained to me what he expects from me. Easier said than done, because everybody doesn't listen, right? And we see so many players, jack of all trades, master of none, can't find a role. Great players. And I always used to wonder after my career, guys from junior, well, what happened to that guy? He only had a cup of coffee in the league. He was so good. He was way more talented than me. You know, how come he didn't have longevity or a successful career? And then once it's all said and done and you reflect, you understand why. And that conversation, Lou, I get up, throw the chair on the floor. He was like a Wolverine. I didn't know if Lou was going to jump over the desk at me. He just crossed his arms. He smiled, and I'm almost at the door, ready to slam it. He goes, "Hey, Kenny, you master that drum, you're going to play 15 years in this league. You do, like you said, and like I said, if you don't want to be that drummer, I'll see if I'll call and see if teams need a violinist." I slammed the door, walk out. I took it to heart. I listened, you know, and again, it was probably for a young player the best thing I ever heard because I didn't have to do more. Because if it doesn't mean I couldn't score, it doesn't mean I couldn't get an assist or provide offense, but don't get away from what is going to make me successful and do my part on the team to have success. Because he said, if I try to do too much, if I hang on the puck, which you're not as capable in junior or college as you are in the National Hockey League, there's only so many Scott Niedermayers to go around type of deal. And I listened. I said, he doesn't care. So I used to joke, Lou had the zap collar on me. And once I got over the red line and still had the puck on my stick, he'd zap me from up top. But it worked out pretty well. And when I retired in 2003, we had a little press conference, and I turned to Lou right out of the gate and said, just to piss you off, I played 20 years. Oh my God. He started chuckling. He only him and I, it was an inside joke. He knew exactly what I was talking about because of that one meeting, but it was invaluable. It meant everything to me. And I listened to him.
You listened, and obviously guys around you listen as well, because it's funny. I've had Marty Brodeur on this podcast before too. And one of the big comments we had was, those Devils teams that won those 3 cups, you were part of all 3 of those Stanley Cups. There was some great talent on the team, but they weren't, to your point of your analogy, they weren't all first violinists or pianists, or they weren't all like everybody had their role. And I remember in 1994, we kind of looked at yourself and the Rangers and thought, who's going to make it through this? And the Rangers knocked you off. I think it was in the Eastern Conference Final.
Double overtime.
Yeah. And rather than it crushing you guys' soul, I think it changed what your mentality was, and then led you to the success you had in 1995 for the first Stanley Cup in franchise history.
You're absolutely right, Gino. From the standpoint, we had the Rangers down 3-2, Game 6 up 2-0 in our own building, dominating the game. If it would have been 5-6-0 if not for Mike Richter, who was such an underappreciated, underrated goaltender in my mind. I think he's a legend, and I know him now very well because we all talk about the stories and great series we had against each other, as much as hatred as there was. Whether it's me talking to Adam Graves, I grew up with Mark Messier. He was a big mentor of mine. We didn't speak for 2 years when he came to the Rangers. It was just too big of a rivalry, but we reminisce, and that was part of our process. They had a lot of veteran guys that had won Stanley Cups. They score late goal in period 2 to make it 2-1, and we froze. And yes, Mark Messier, one of the greatest leaders of all time, took the team on his back, and we know history, and they ended up scoring 3 goals. He had the hat trick in the 3rd period to beat us 4-2 in Game 6. We didn't know how to close the deal yet. That was part of our learning experience. And then Game 7 is a coin toss. Great game, evenly played. Somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. We end up losing in double overtime. As crushing as that was, we couldn't wait for next season. We got that experience. Now it's how much do you learn from that? So in 95, which we didn't have, it was a shortened season. We didn't have a particularly good year. I think we were 5th seed, something along those lines. It was all about the playoffs to us. We're going, but it kind of forgot about us again. We were the 2nd best team in the National Hockey League in the regular season to those New York Rangers, who won the cup as far as points were concerned during the 94 season. 95, we were one of those teams that could turn the switch on. We had the same core, same cast. We couldn't wait. And we steamrolled in 95 because now there was no panic. We learned to deal with the emotions of the ups and downs of a period, a game, a series, whatever it may be. I think we went 16-4 in 95, beat the mighty Red Wings in the finals in the sweep. We were heavily underdogs in that series, but we were so confident, quietly confident, because we just had a group that had learned from 94, and we weren't going to let it happen again. So all those ups and downs and emotions, as you always hear a lot of times, you got to stay even keeled. We learned how to do that in 95, and made all the difference in the world. As crushing as a defeat in 94 that was.
And it was crazy because there were original six franchises that are like, come on, man. The freaking New Jersey Devils organization is barely alive. They couldn't survive. And now they've accomplished this. They win the Stanley Cup, but it wasn't just a one-off. During your career, you're still there. You win again in 2000. You win again in 2003. 3 Stanley Cups over a 9-year stretch. We've seen, like, you were at the back end of dynasties that we saw with the Islanders and the Oilers, but we hadn't seen it for a long time. So for you guys go out and do it, and the Red Wings, and of course the Hawks ended up doing, and the Pens, but it's unheard of nowadays. Now that you still work in the game, you accomplish it, you were part of it, you still work in the game. Does it help you to understand the magnitude of what you guys accomplished that much more, to the fact that you won 3 cups in a 9-year stretch?
Yeah, and went 4 times, Gino, and lost Game 7 in 2001 to win back-to-back to Colorado, up 3-2 again. But they were a great team. And
I just didn't want to poke the nerve there, because I'm sure that's.
No, but you know what? I'm just proud that I was part of something, part of a team that just expected to win, had a belief. And when your expectations and you raise the bar to the point where it's Stanley Cup or bust for like a 9-year period that you talked about, doesn't mean it always materializes. We know other teams have the same mindset. I think in today's game, though, it's even tougher because, you know, in that stretch there, it was us, it was Detroit, it was Dallas, you know, teams, Colorado. You expected one of them to be in the Stanley Cup Finals, usually. At the time. The Flyers were formidable too, and that's the team we always had to go through, and they were a great team and tough to get through on 2 Eastern Conference Finals. Today, the competitive balance is off the charts, and obviously the salary cap era and everything, you can't keep teams together as much as you like, or a core group like we had. We had 5 guys. It doesn't sound like a lot that were, but it is, on all 3 Stanley Cup championship teams. That's a core. That's guys that know what it takes, say the right thing at the right time, lead by example, like our captain Scotty Stevens or whatever it may be. And we had the pieces, and I just at times don't think that, you know, and then come playoff time in today's game, even though I've evolved and I love the skill and creativity, and it's even at a whole nother level than my era. I love my era. It was a little nastier. It is what it is. I don't compare. People ask me that. But today, come playoff time, the more things change, the more they stay the same, don't they? I mean, if I looked at the Vegas Golden Knights winning last year, they were a replica of our 95 Devils. Depth, fourth line scoring, toughness, big defense, good goaltending. I mean, I told George McPhee, who I played with in the 80s, and when we made the playoffs for the first time, saw him recently when Vegas was here, that I thought I was looking into a mirror. They were identical, and that's why they won. Because I don't think at times teams, young players, yeah, you want your stats and numbers, and all the young fans, everybody looks at those kinds of things. But there's a sacrifice to be made come playoff time, that you're not cheating on the wrong side of the puck. It's not about how many points you get. Yeah, your great players have to be great, have to create offense. But when the Washington Capitals, and I'll leave it with this, Gino, won the Stanley Cup, I'm using it as an example. Working for NHL Network and watching the details of the game, and that's the most important thing. Ovechkin, it took them double-digit years to understand, I got to block the shot. I got to be inside the blue line instead of outside the blue. And he was magnificent. Yes, he scored his goals when they needed, but he was doing all the other little things. When your top players are doing that, it resonates on the bench. And when your star players are doing it, and I say that's why the Washington Capitals won the Cup. They were led by Ovechkin, but he started to do the details better of the game and not just about goals.
And it's not easy. There's a price to be paid when you go through a journey like that. Like anytime there's going to be growth, expanding your horizons, trying to bring in new thoughts, there's going to be problems. And I feel comfortable asking you about this because you've been very public about your own personal struggles.
Yeah.
But I think that the really, really important thing to point out here is you went public with your personal struggles at a time where that was not commonplace. Today, we hear a lot about the NHL, NHLPA player assistance program and players going into it. And it's anonymous in terms of we don't know what's going on, what's happening with the player. But your struggle was made very, very public to the point where you feel comfortable sharing. Tell our audience about November of 1997 for you, 2 years after winning the Stanley Cup, a moment, a decision, a time in your life which really changed your entire life.
Well, yeah, absolutely, Gino, and I talk about it all the time from the standpoint if I could help one other person, it's all worth it. And privately behind the scenes, I have many former teammates or players call me and they said, Ken, I'm just wondering about this thing, addiction. They go, if you could get sober, I'm hoping anybody can, and maybe I need a little help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I was hard on the ice, off the ice. That was my personality. Drinking became a problem. I was the first guy to go public. Believe it or not, I was fifth on the depth charts as far as entering this substance abuse behavioral. From what I hear from the program, because there's still some same guys there that I keep in touch with once in a while. And I was the first one to go public because it was during the season. It was the toughest decision in my life because the game, my team, the Devils meant the world to me. And that's all I cared about. And by the way, it was playing really good hockey in the month of October. Now, I was urged, but I was very lucky, very fortunate, and grateful for the fact that I had an owner. You mentioned Dr. McMullen, who was like a second father to me. And I probably could do no wrong with him to a fault, but I was one of those guys. He was a loyal man. And I was one of those guys in the early years that stood up for the colors and did everything he asked and management asked along the way. And I had Lou Lamoriello, who cared about me as a person. And so there was, me and Lou had many meetings over the time. And I said, don't worry, I'd curb it because my game is so important. So I'd white knuckle it, would stop drinking for a month or two. Look, did I know I had a problem? Sure. But to admit that you're a big, tough hockey player, nothing can have control of me. You know what I mean? So when that time came to go in Lou's office November, and I said, I had tears in my eyes. I was beaten up going, I think after a bender or whatever, and I was more of a binge guy. I said, Lou, I got to check this out. And he says, Kenny, I knew this was coming, and we'll be there for you. Go take care of yourself. Take care. This is we'll be there for you when you get back, because that's your concern as a player. Got to keep it to myself. I can get through this, whatever it may be. But my life was chaotic off the ice, and I went to rehab during the season and missed 2.5 months that year. You're talking about 97, and just like Lou and Dr. Mullen said, they were there for me through it all, through thick and thin, and because they were loyal and understood, prior. And that's what I was grateful about. That all I did is care about the team. I had a problem, and I had to admit it. And
was there a moment? Was there one particular moment, or was it something that gradually built? Was there a moment where you said, "Okay, enough. I got to do something now"?
Well, it had started after 95, really, for me, when we won the cup, partied, celebrated, and I felt empty. 2-3 weeks after fulfilling a dream of winning a Stanley. That's all I cared about, was winning, doing my little part to help a team get from where we were, winning 17 games a year in the early 80s, to being Stanley Cup champions 12 years later. I'm on cloud nine. I'm living the life. I'm, the happiest person in the world. And then, like I said, 2-3 weeks later, after that kind of opened the door for me, where I go, there's something wrong here. I know I drink a little too much, but I'm not feeling good about myself. I was down. I was depressed. Am I supposed to feel down 3 weeks after winning a Stanley Cup? No, right? But then, as it goes along, I train and I, go in the next season, and it always takes what it takes. Took me time. Played the next year, had a pretty good year, even though the team unfortunately didn't make the playoffs, but didn't on the last day of the season. And then I went into '97, and that's when things escalated again, and I was down. And I said, if you're gonna, the only way I was gonna start to get help was if I take what's most important away from me, and that's hockey, and focus on me, my life, because I have a life after and everything. And like I said, I'm just, it still brings goosebumps to me how supportive the organization and the late great Dr. McMullen was to me, because when I left, I was crying my eyes out. Here's this big tough guy crying. I didn't do it too much, and Dr. McMullen and Lou hugged me and said, "Kenny, this isn't the end of your life. We're here for you. Don't worry about your hockey career. It'll be when you get fit, and when you get take care of your problems, and understand about your inner demons. We're going to be here for you." And they were there for me when I came back and got back to playing and everything else. But Gino, it took a little longer after that, because I always preface that I stayed sober close to a couple of years. Relapsed. There's not many first-time winners, but they were still there for me. But the seeds were planted. I was aware. Then we win the cup in 2003. I played Game 7. We all know the story there, where I didn't play every game in the playoffs, but that was understandable. I was 39. I knew where I was at in my career. Storybook ending. Was ready to retire. Knew you couldn't go out any better way on top of Game 7. But yeah, now I didn't have to be accountable. I didn't have to be as in good a shape, and I was a workout machine. I burnt the candle at both ends. That's why I was able to sustain it probably at times during my career, because if I didn't work out and have that fortitude that I had, well, then I probably would have been out of the league a lot earlier. But I worked out like a demon. But it catches up to you as you get older, obviously. And then after I retired, I went back to drinking, and this is me. And maybe I don't have a problem. Maybe it's not as bad as I thought. You always fool yourself. You always justify, until 2011, up and down. Stayed sober for a while during that period, but a lot of relapses. It was hard for me. I'm not going to lie about that, but I proudly say August 9th, 2011, I have not had a drink or any mind-altering substances. I've been sober 12 and a half years, and probably my greatest accomplishment, proud of it, but it was nothing I did for myself. Yes, you have to have the willingness, but you have to have some faith, and I certainly did to get to where I did. But all the seeds were planted. And by the way, in 2011, I didn't go back to rehab. My wife had said to me, she goes, "Do you want to go back to rehab? Something's got to change." I said, "Hon, all those seeds have been planted. I've been to rehab plenty of times. If I don't get it now, I never will." And I looked her in the eye and says, "I'm done." I had a little incident that's something I don't discuss, but it stayed relatively private. But it was that aha moment that, well, I don't experience without hurting myself or anybody else, going, it's over. It's got to end, but I need help. And, I had some faith, said, "Conk me on the head if you're up there, my man, God," because I need somebody to just show me that I can't do this anymore, or it's going to end bad. And from that day forward, the obsession left. I can't explain it, but when I share with guys that are trying to get sober and try to help one person, I just tell them, you have to have the willingness and the want to change your life. And that's exactly what I did. And sorry if I got into it going on a little long about it, but it means everything to me. It's poison to me. I have no problem being around drinking, whatever. And I joke with my friends now. Sometimes they'll still 12 years in say, "Okay, I go have a beer or whatever." I go, "Guys, I spilt more than you drank in my lifetime." I laugh at myself. It's not a problem. I choose to do what I want. I'm not going to choose what you're doing. You guys enjoy. I enjoyed a lot of my time when I had some, over the years and the parties and everything. But when I realized I had a problem, I had to change something. And like I said, 12 and a half years later, this August will be 13 years, August 9th. And I'm still crazy and as ever, but I do it without drinking. And that's
It's Kenny. I mean, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you being so open to share your story, because there's got to be so many people out there listening to this right now and saying, that's me. That's me. I tried, I slipped, I tried again, I slipped. But to see you on the other side of it now, I think you said 11 years or 12 years.
well, 13 coming up August 9th.
Wow. That's amazing. 13 years
That's the
sober. That's
birthday for me is my sobriety birthday. It really is, because I can never take it for granted. And I never understood that it's the first drink that gets you drunk, Ken. That was the one. It sounds like for an alcoholic, for somebody that's addicted. I never understood that term. I understood it. It finally clicked where I play the tape through. I see where it ends. I may go out and I could maybe go relapse again and go out a couple of times, and it's not that bad. I do what you call successful drinking, because I was I wanted to be that guy that was how do you put it, you know, a heavy drinker that just, you know, managed it. But once I joke about myself too, and I say once I became a pickle, I could not go back to a cucumber, and that happened in the 90s. But it took me a lot of years to get it.
I've never heard that analogy.
but I did stay sober, like I said, because my career was so important to me, and I was able to white knuckle it a lot during my career, off and on, when I recognized the problem. But it wasn't enough to, you know, after that rehab and a couple of rehabs, until after my career, where I had that spiritual awakening, call it, and that's just being grateful and fortunate, because I look at guys that fight the fight, the good fight, and people want to blame them. Why are you wrecking your life? Why are you doing it? And I go, they're not trying to do it. They don't want to be the way they are. But until they earnestly want to try and get better, get help, you can't do it on your own kind of attitude, then it's nearly impossible. I live that. And now, if, like I said, anybody reaches out to me, I try my best to, I said, look, I have no magic wand or potion to get you sober, if that's what you really want to do. But I can share my experience, my strength, my hope, and where I was and how I turned my life around. And that's the bottom line. And said it might not work for you. We're all different. But if you hear one thing, and I'll tell you, you know, lastly on this is, when you mentioned people out there hearing this, I cannot tell you how many emails I got from mothers, hockey fans, their 18-year-old son already having problems, whatever it may be, going, by you sharing your story, it helped my son recognize that maybe he's got a problem, or a parent, or whatever it may be along the way, or their uncle or aunt. And it meant the world to me, because you can make a difference. Like I said, you ain't changing everybody, but if you can help one person, it's all worth it.
That's awesome, Kenny. That's awesome. It's so great to see you on the other side of this, and you look fantastic. You're obviously still a workout mogul. You look great. You sound great. You mentioned briefly a few seconds ago about your last game, and we all know how that turned out. Yeah, because I'm in the business, I know how that turned out. But it's an incredible story, the way you finished your NHL career. You had won your cup in 95. You won your cup in 2000. You're now in the Stanley Cup final in 2003. You're getting on years. You know you're at the end of the rope. You're not getting all the ice time you want. You're playing for a legend himself, Pat Burns, who was the head coach at that point. And I'm going to guess at that point, you weren't probably getting along real well with him, because you kind of disagreed with each other on when you should or shouldn't dress. Take our audience through Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final in 2003.
Another story I've told a lot, but it never gets old. It's always special to me. As tough as it was in 2003, and look, as an older player, you understand, as your career evolves and younger guys are coming up, that maybe things, you might not play as much as you want. You might not get in every game. But as a competitor, I don't care who you are, you still got to be angry. And I mentioned when we started all this, and everybody that knows me, I wear my emotion on my sleeve, and I'm not afraid to show it to the coaches, GM, because that was me. That was my drive, my inner drive. And yeah, at times Pat Burns and I did not see eye to eye, and everybody knows the late great Pat Burns. And while you're a player and while you're in it, you don't agree with a lot of their decisions. 10 years when you're done playing your playing days and you're reflecting, you go, man, I understand what he was going through. You know, coaches have tough decisions. You don't see it at the time. You never will, because you have that competitiveness. And Pat Burns, as we know, had that burning fire and competitiveness as much as any coach I've ever played for. So long story short, so I played game 6 and 7 against the Ottawa Senators in the Eastern Conference Finals. They were the best team in the National Hockey League all season long. Our team, that was probably out of the 3 cup teams, not as talented, not as good. We just knew how to win and understood what it took. And Pat Burns is a big part of that. But I play those games. So going into the Stanley Cup Finals, well, obviously I'm going to start game 1, right? I mean, obviously you'd have to think if I could play in game 6 and 7 against the best team in the league, now you're not going to stun me. And he tells me I'm not dressing, and I was angry. And it all started in the Boston series. I think that was the second round. I played every playoff game in Devils history, and not that had to continue. I understood again where I was at. And Lou, one thing, you know, the relationship I had with him was outstanding. He was like that tough father on me attitude, or tough uncle, whatever you want to call it. But he let coaches make his decisions. And I played 13 straight in the playoffs, or I don't know what it was, 10, 11, kept my streak alive. And we're up 3-0 against Boston. All of a sudden, he's going to not play me in game 4. Well, oh boy. I mean, so my producer on MSG now, where we cover the Devils games, Roland Dratch, who was a young, I don't know if he's producing or just assistant producer, whatever it may have been at the time. We're in Boston and we're in the arena practice, and then he hears some shouting, arguing around the corner. All the writers weren't in the building yet. And he's looking around, ducking around the TV truck, and he's hearing screaming. He thought it was going to come to blows as Pat and me are going at it. He's telling me I'm not going to play game 4. Oh boy. And I know how tough Pat was, but I was losing it. And there is just absolute pandemonium. Thank God the writers weren't in there. We all settled down. Lou came in, got involved, and finally he took me aside and said, Kenny, I got to let the coaches make the decisions. I'm not saying it's the right decision, but, you know, we're going to go there. I said, okay, Lou, but just I wanted it done with a little more grace. You know?
Yeah.
I need to be pacified a little bit. But I understood Pat, because Pat's got tough decisions to make, and I know how fired up. Maybe I didn't understand as much at the time. When you're in it, I really understand now and reflect. And then I don't play game 4. We lose. He puts me back in game 5. We win. And he kind of alluded in game 3. I was fighting the puck. We'd won 3-0, and that's what I was yelling to him about. How bad could have I been? We just won 3-0, you know what I mean? So I just like how the whole thing was handled, and maybe the communication wasn't what I expected from both of us. So sure enough, that started me being in and out of the lineup. Plus, but now I was kind of accepting. I was just going to work hard, and I was already part of it. I was winding my career down, and then what happened in not starting the Stanley Cup Finals? I don't play the first 2. Well, we win. I don't expect to play. I'm staying ready. We lose the next 2. So maybe in the Stanley Cup Finals against the Ducks, I thought I was going to get in game 5. I don't get in game 5, but I'm not going to rock the boat. And Trevodosky, who I became very close with, you know, I took them aside and said, you see me walking around like the Tasmanian devil. This is not against you. You do your job. And that was part of being a leader still, of saying this is about winning, whatever it takes. It's not about you. And Trevor was nervous, and he was apologizing to me for even starting game 1. And I'm like, you know, he was a young, talented defenseman. I said, Trev, believe me, man, I love you. You play your game. We need you. You know, it's not, this isn't about me and you. And, you know, we became close then. And I just wanted him to understand that this is about winning. I may be grumpy and peeved.
Yeah.
I don't get in game 5. So now I just want to win. I said, I've been part of this. It doesn't matter if I get in. We win game 5. It's 3-2. Go back to Anaheim. I definitely don't expect to play. Don't play. We win. Or go back, lose to Anaheim. It's 3-3. So now I still don't expect to play. I haven't played in 2 weeks. We get off the plane because it's only one day in between, long flight, West Coast, East Coast. We get off the plane and Pat takes me aside and says, before the team meal, we're going to stay at the hotel for prior to the night in game 7, not go home. And he says, Kenny, you're in tomorrow night. Don't tell anybody, and walks away from me. Now I'm going, this guy's certifiably nuts. He is certifiably nuts. I know we have our differences, but now he's making the wrong decision. And that's what I believe. He doesn't need to put me in. This isn't a goodwill thing, putting in the longest tenured devil in most games played. It's about winning the Stanley Cup, Pat. That's what's going through my mind. I haven't played in 2 weeks. Now I'm feeling like a rookie going, what if I make that one mistake? That's going through my mind that costs us the Stanley Cup. I call one of my best friends. I call home as well after that. And I said to my best friend, I go, you're not going to believe this. He goes, you're in tomorrow night. Right. I didn't even finish my sentence. I go, how the hell would you know that? Because now I think he's crazy. I shouldn't be in. He goes, Kenny, you played over 1,300 games. Playoffs and regular season, it's like riding a bike. I think he'll be just fine. And what I found out is he talked to Scott Stevens on the plane and said, I'm thinking about putting Kenny in. We need that little intangible because of the respect the fans have for him, everything. Will he bring that emotion? Whatever it takes. It didn't matter how much I played. I think I played just under 12 minutes. We end up winning 3-0. But when I was announced not as a healthy scratch, when they didn't hear my name, I could hear in the dressing room. I had goosebumps. Fans went nuts. They went crazy. When I touched the puck for the first time, I wanted to tell the fans, pipe down. They stood up. They were giving me an ovation. I'm going, pipe down. I'm nervous as it is, But I was so grateful to the fans because they just, and thus the Mr. Devil, that's how they, the fans gave me that nickname because of the longevity and how long I've been with the team. And they just, and Pat talked to Scotty, and said, do you think I should put him in? And Scotty said, absolutely. You got to have him in. I mean, he's going to bring that emotion, that life. The fans are going to be pumped. And whatever little piece it is, whatever that game 7 intangible you need, and whether it helped, didn't help, whatever may be, we won. And I knew right then, I went around the arena, banged on the glass to say thank you to every fan because I was like, this is it for me. I thought maybe halfway through I'd try to play one more year. And even Lou Lamoriello, after the game, I went into Pat Burns' office. I handed him a cigar because I was celebrating with cigars. That was my, every once in a while, became my vice after my career. I enjoy a cigar here and there. I said, Pat, and I know Pat liked him. I said, I know we didn't see eye to eye. It makes me tear up now because I know what he went through health-wise. I said, Pat, you know what? I know this was tough on you. And I said, just thank you very much. I'm indebted to you for putting you in game 7 because this is it for me. And I couldn't ask to go out a better way. And he said, Kenny, he apologized too. He says, maybe I didn't handle it very well, but he said, I knew we needed you in for game 7. I knew we needed your emotion, your leadership, whatever that little intangible might to help our team in game 7. And always, well and good. All's ends well kind of attitude. I didn't say it probably, but I was just so grateful to him and his wife as well. When we celebrated 20 years in '95, she came, 20-year reunion we had, and she gave me a big hug and said, Kenny, you don't know how tough this was. I said, it's over. I said, Pat, I love him. The guy, did what he had to do. We won. Nothing else matters. We won. And I said, are you kidding me? I'm grateful. I can't believe he put me in game 7 because I thought your husband was nuts.
What a great story.
Yeah. So my stories go on, Gene. I apologize if they're long.
No, not at all. That's a phenomenal.
It brings back such great memories through tough times and where you're such a competitor. I wanted to kill him as he wanted to kill me at times during that playoff run. But, God rest his soul. I always, every once in a while, look up and say, Pat, I know we didn't always get along, but man, am I grateful to you. And I'm still grateful. I don't take anything for granted in my career or my life anymore. I'm grateful that I went out a champion. I hoisted the cup in
You
Game
did.
7. How many athletes can say that? And that was pretty special.
What a way to end a career, though. Could you have picked a better one? Like Game 7, you're on the ice, the fans love you, they adore you. The numbers you put together, you're Mr. Devil, your third Stanley Cup. That's amazing. You played with and against some incredible people and in some phenomenal cities. I want to play 5 fast facts with you. I'll ask you a quick question. You give me your quick answer to it. Number 1 was going to be, who's the best coach you ever played for? Is that one obvious?
Jacques Lemaire.
Jacques Lemaire. Number
Larry
2.
There too. I put them as a duo, as a tandem.
Best
and all the Stanley Cup Championship coaches were great, including Pat. But I put those as a duo because Larry Robinson quickly, I know this is rapid fire, taught me more about defense in the first week he came and positioning and not exerting too much energy, understood the little things of the game. Then I learned in my first 10 years of my career.
Perfect. Best teammate you ever played with? Would that have been Larry Robinson or who?
I didn't play with Larry. Remember, best teammate.
Sorry. I mean, Scotty Stevens. Would that have been Scotty Stevens?
The 2 Scotts, but I could go on and on. I always say Scott Niedermayer is the best player I've ever played with. Remarkable, even though we were totally different. He was so graceful and great. I just loved him. Still a dear friend today.
Who did you hate playing against the most and why?
Oh, God. That one's tough to rapid fire. Well, since I had to fight every once in a while, probably Ty Domi at times because he'd always challenge me in the Garden as a young frothing kid, and he was tough as nails. So he's one of them, and now we're dear friends after because you find out you're great competitors. Rick Tocchet up there as well. We battle a lot. I'm also a great friend with him. Love those guys. And back to my teammates, Brodeur, all those guys, because we don't win without the greatest goalie of all time. I'm biased.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Favorite NHL city to play in?
Montreal.
Makes sense.
Just the aura. The first time playing at the Forum, the old Montreal Forum, was pretty special. Dream come true for a kid. Also love Chicago, the old Chicago Stadium.
One final question. If you hadn't become an NHL player, what do you think you would have been done for a career?
Wow. Sports was everything. Baseball. I was a left-handed pitcher. And for people that don't know, because it's in a bio somewhere, I was a really good pitcher in Western Canada. I went to a Cincinnati Red development camp when I was 15 years old in Montana. I had some ability, and that's would have been 1A, believe it or not, even though I grew up in the cold. I would hope sports would be, but I found out it was going to be a lot harder when they started hitting everything. When they couldn't hit it in Canada, they were hitting a lot of my pitches. And when I went to this the young rookie development camp, and they'd asked me to go to college and get you a scholarship possibly, but hockey was 1A. So it's all sports related, Gino. I hate to say it. I was one of those rarities. I don't recommend it. I threw my eggs in one basket. I said to my mother, since 7 years old, 10 times a day, I'm going to play in the National Hockey League. And she would pass it by me and say, yeah, Kenny. She thought I was nuts.
And you did it, and you did it successfully. A 3-time Stanley Cup champion, Mr. Double, Ken Daneyko. Kenny, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you're doing so well, that you're getting ready to celebrate 13 years of sobriety. Could not be happier for you, my friend. Thank you so much for this.
Thanks for having me, Gino. Like I said, some of my stories go on, but you know what? It's because it just brings back, such fond memories. I get excited about it. I still have that emotion. I just don't drink anymore.
Good job, pal. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for having me. A real pleasure.
Three-time Stanley Cup champion, New Jersey Devil legend, Mr. Devil, Ken Daneyko. The Overtime Podcast is proudly presented by 7-Eleven and Athlete's Care. Before leaving the rink, order your favorite Slurpee, fresh 100% premium Arabica coffee, hot from the oven pizza and wings, pint of ice cream, or even a carton of milk, a dozen eggs, and a loaf of bread from the 7 Now app. and Team 7-Eleven will have your order ready for pickup 24/7. Athletes Care is proud to be celebrating its 25th year, offering sports medicine services to both elite athletes and the general population who require rehab for a new or chronic injury or pain. Go to where the best go. Athletes Care Sports Medicine Clinics with 24 locations in the Greater Toronto Area and Ottawa. Hey, if you missed any parts of the show, don't worry. Visit our website at overtimepodcast.ca, where you can both listen and subscribe to future shows. 7-Eleven's Overtime Podcast can be found on Spotify, iTunes Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. As well, please check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel at O-Time Podcast. Until next week, I'm Gino Retta saying so long, hockey fans, and thanks for joining us on the 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast.